The following recording is a replay of an interview I did for the Autumn of Healing Summit in October 2024, which was host to over 100 experts in healing from around the world. This summit was organized by Matthias and Doris Badner, and I had the privilege of being involved in their 2023 summit as well, called the Network to Heal Summit. I highly recommend you subscribe to their newsletter at matthiasbadner.de so you can be notified of any future summits. Matthias and Doris' summits are world-renowned, and every year you'll find the world's forerunners in health and healing speaking at their events, such as Dr. Bruce Lipton and Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt. So be sure to subscribe at www.matthiasbadner.de to be notified of any future events. That's MATHIASBERNER.de. Enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Autumn of Healing. I have the privilege today of interviewing Jon Gamble. Welcome, Jon.
Thank you so much for having me on the program today.
Such a pleasure to have you on. Your work has really inspired me so much and made such a big difference in my clinical practice and also in my personal life, because you've been treating my husband, and just the way of your inquiry, you actually managed to pick something up that nobody has ever picked up before for him, which then we figured out that it's actually the same problem that my daughter has had. So I just had to get you on the show. Also had the privilege of meeting you at the AHA conference last year. So it's always nice when you get to have a chat, and I've had you on my Homeopathy Hangout podcast. So when Matthias asked me to get somebody on the show on the summit to talk about transforming pain into vitality, I really wanted to get you on the show because you've got so much experience in this field. Also, you were the author of Mastering Chronic Disease, which this book has really, really been such a help in my clinic as well. So I wanted to get you on today to talk to us a little bit about some of the types of pain that you see in your clinic, maybe more specifically endocrine dysfunction, which there's some great information in the book on that, all sorts of thyroid dysfunction and fibromyalgia, all sorts of bits and pieces that you've got in here. Maybe just talk to us a little bit about the endocrine dysfunction and the types of things that you see in your clinic in this area.
Okay, so there's two areas you want to talk about: endocrine dysfunction and then maybe pain, which is, I gather, the subject of the symposium. Is that right?
Yep.
So with the endocrine system, there's widespread endocrine disease, as we all know. We're seeing obesity. We're seeing hypertrophy of endocrine tissue. So in males, that presents as enlarged prostate, right? Probably half of my patients over 50 who are male have enlarged prostate. So that's enlarged endocrine tissue. In females, you're seeing ovarian cysts, you're seeing uterine fibroids, you're seeing fibrocystic breast disease. So the reproductive system is becoming hypertrophied. And then we have goiter, so enlargement of the thyroid. And then we have pancreatic dysfunction, so sugar dysregulation. And all these things are to do with the endocrine system and the wrong messaging that the body is receiving about the endocrine system. And why is it all going so wrong? I think it started going wrong probably in the 1970s, when everybody was told, stop having fat and have carbohydrates instead. So everyone started buying low-fat this and low-fat that and eating muesli bars all the time and having very little protein. And that's when things switched with the sugar dysregulation. But I think the big problem for all of us to grapple with as homeopaths treating chronic disease is the fact that we all have in our bodies the nanoplastics. Think of the plastic that's wrapped around your block of cheese when you buy your cheese, the plastic around your chicken before you bake it or your roast leg of lamb, the plastic bottle containing the yogurt when you buy it. So these fatty foods pull the nanoplastics out of the plastic packaging into the food, and we consume them. And those nanoplastics are xenoestrogens. So they're constantly messaging the body, grow something, right? So estrogen is to grow babies. If you can't grow a baby, the messaging is still there, grow something, grow something. So in males and females, we're getting this hypertrophy of endocrine tissue. So what we're doing now is we're encouraging patients to not store their food in plastic, to slice off that outer layer of the cheese that's been resting hard against the plastic packaging. And we give plastic detoxes homeopathic detoxes along with the usual remedies. So, for example, a man who's got benign prostate enlargement, not only just giving whatever remedy we give, whether it's sarsaparilla or whatever it might be, we'll give him the xenoestrogen detox at the same time. So that's changing the messaging of the body to say, don't store these nanoplastics, get rid of them, don't hold on to them and use them, and follow the messaging they're giving.
That is really, really important that you've said, and you're so right with that signaling of that's estrogen's job is growth stuff. And
Right.
I heard you mention that once before, and it made so much sense. And we are certainly seeing so many, like you said, fibrocystic breasts and fibrous breasts and all these sorts of things. And also something more worryingly is the precocious puberty that we see quite often in young girls these days, girls getting their periods at 8 and 9 years old, which is pretty traumatic. You should not have to deal with that if you're an 8 or 9-year-old girl, but more worrying is what effect that has on their endocrine system at large and what is the issues that they're going to have a little bit down the track. And like you said, poor boys are also affected, and we're seeing that a lot more, I think, these days with potentially gender dysphoria and things like that.
Absolutely.
So something happening in the environment. And there are these plastics absolutely everywhere. And something else that I've just recently become aware of is the antimony that is released by the BPA. Is it the antimony that's released by the BPA, which is often in a lot of white fillings? So we've replaced our mercury fillings with white fillings, but then a lot of people are grinding teeth due to parasites, which apparently 50% of us have, grinding their teeth. And so they're constantly releasing this BPA into their system as well, which has been really interesting.
That's right. Yeah. So when you're running the Oligoscan, which I think you're going to mention in a little while, when you see the high antimony, or if you're running hair tissue analysis, when you see the high antimony, that's a sign that the xenoestrogen load is really getting unmanageable. Because the antimony comes from PET plastic.
Yeah. And so a lot of these people that often they go on light and easy type diets and they get all their food in plastics and they heat it in the microwave and plastic and then getting it all ingested that way on top of in our environment. I have also heard that with a lot of contraceptives and things being flushed down the toilet and even from being in our urine that we can ingest it that way as the water is being recycled. I don't know how true that is, but
I think it's probably true. It isn't just plastics. I only mention plastics because so where we live in the country and we grow a lot of our own food. We have no glyphosate on our property and we only buy organic produce. Well, when I say we only buy it, when we can source it, we buy it as best we can, right? So we did one of the chemical tests you do from that American lab that's just changed its name. It was called Great Plains. Now it's called Mosaic Diagnostics. So they run this test called the chemical toxins, which is a urine test. So we thought, let's just see what our chemical toxins are like, having eaten organic food for all these years, super high. The plasticizers in our bodies are super high. So if we represent a healthy part of the population, then people who don't eat organic food are going to have much higher than what we have. So you can assume that no matter how pure and how organic and how careful your diet is, everyone's going to have these super high plastic nanoparticles in their tissues. And that's the big problem for our messaging of our endocrine system.
Something you just mentioned before that I know some of the listeners are going to be asking about, their ears are going to be perking up, is when you talked about the xenoestrogen detox. Can you maybe just tell the attendees about the xenoestrogen detox and also the pesticides and all those other detoxes that you have created and how you would use them in clinic?
Okay, so they're all mentioned in this book. I know it's a bit flagrant holding my book up in front of you, but that's where they're all described.
Okay, I'll do it for you.
We put together 3 protocols about 15 years ago now, and one of them, Protocol 3, contains the xenoestrogen, which is chemicals and plasticizers, basically, and that's available as a homeopathic detox in 16C, 30C, 200C, and 1M, I think. And that's available in Melbourne from Martin and Pleasance. But I think recently it's been sent over to Ainsworth's in London. So I think you can now buy it from Ainsworth's too, which is really good. But there's also one that's been released now by, what's the Fighting Fire with Fire? The man from
Ton Janssen.
Ton, that's right. He's now released a polyplasticizers. So that'll have the same effect as a estrogen detoxer. And that's called polyplastics.
Ah, that's wonderful.
If you can't source ours, you can source his. It's the same. It'll be the same.
Amazing. And would you just use that like through the bank with pretty much all your clients, or most that would be one of the first things that you would do if you were seeing a client with endocrine dysfunction?
Anything that involves endocrine hypertrophy, I now almost always give it in conjunction with my specific remedy of choice. Okay, so when you've got a toxic load that's largely invisible, right, because it's not going to show on in your normal blood tests with your doctor, it's not going to show in your hair analysis unless your hair analysis includes antimony. When you've got a largely invisible obstacle to cure, it's going to block the effect of your remedy. It's very frustrating for a homeopath. But if you give a detox that's specific, and remember, all homeopathics are highly specific in their messaging. If you give a specific detox, it's going to potentiate the results of the remedy you've chosen.
Absolutely. And over what sort of period of time, those of us who do Jon Janssen's homeopathic detox therapy, we tend to do it over a 4 to 8 week time frame. Have you got a specific time frame that you like to use it, or a specific way that you like to use it?
I tend to just give the ascending potencies once every second day. And on the alternate day, I give the remedy of choice to treat whatever the condition is. And I will keep doing that in ascending potencies over many months. If it's really critical, so let's say the hypertrophy has turned into a cancer, then I probably would do that for years and not stop it. Once I see the action of the medicines working, I wouldn't stop it at all. And I have used it in many cases for years when there's been a critical health issue.
So maybe something like using the polyxeno 1M, say once a week for like a few years, or once a month for a few years?
Yes, you could. You could always, because you're always going to have more of the xenoestrogens coming back in through some route in your body, no matter how pure your food. So you don't want the same chemicals reigniting the same messaging in terms of disease causation.
Absolutely. I feel like this is a good kind of segue to talk about Oligoscan, because just for those listeners that don't know about Oligoscan, it's a form of photospectrometry. Am I saying that right? And just
That's
so
right.
you can actually see what it looks like, it's this kind of little device which we use to scan the palm of the hand, and it goes about 4 millimeters into the epidermis. And it can tell us a lot of information. Maybe, do you want to tell us a little bit more about Oligoscan, or even how you stumbled upon it? Because honestly, Jon, this has been life-changing in my practice, and I'm so, so, so grateful. I just wish I discovered it earlier on. Like I said to you, I've done 150 scans now, and I feel like it's just the more I work with it and the more I do rescanning. So clients who have now started coming back for second and even third scans, it's just been eye-opening, and the clients love it. And it's, yeah, I can rave the next hour about how great this software has been in my clinic, but maybe tell people what it is and how you discovered it and how you use it. And we can even pick up endocrine dysfunction on this, which is pretty cool.
In 2013, we hosted a conference in Bali, where you're about to go next month for your conference. And I spoke about heavy metals. And in that time, I was referring to hair tissue mineral analysis. We had a man called Alain Picard, who is from France. He said, we no longer use hair, we use Oligoscan. I said, what the hell is Oligoscan? So he showed me. I said, I want one. So I resurrected my high school French and wrote to the company in France and said, I want to try one in Australia. So through various circuitous routes, they said, okay, you can try one as long as you give us some feedback and tell us what you think about it. So I used it on several of my patients and wrote up some reports and sent it back to them. And they said, okay, you obviously know what you're doing. Would you like to distribute into Australasia? I said, sure. So that's how it all began in just early 2013. And so it's a worldwide system. It's based in Europe, but it's in all the continents of the world. And so it's accessible to everybody. It uses, as you say, spectrophotometry, so there's no radiation or nothing toxic for the patient. It takes an assay of your intracellular space as opposed to hair, which is your extracellular space, your excretion, or your venous blood, which is where medical tests are done, which is what's your transportation system, what's moving around the body. But what actually arrives from the blood into the cell bed, that's what you're seeing with a Oligoscan. So you're seeing both how well the person is absorbing the nutrients and also the things that are blocking them absorbing the nutrients. And also it shows you a lot of the obstacles to cure for our remedies, right? We spend so much time as homeopaths searching for the right remedy for this patient. And when it doesn't work, it's so disheartening. But oftentimes it is the right remedy. There's just something blocking its action. And that's why these kinds of pathology tests, like a Oligoscan, are so valuable for us as practitioners.
It really is. Actually, just this morning, I've got a friend who is really suffering from hay fever at the moment. I said to her, just quickly come in and we'll just do a quick scan and just see if there's like a big red flag of what's going on. And there was a huge, what's called a selenium blockade, which hopefully you can explain to us once I share the screen. And selenium is such an important nutrient for the immune function. So we're actually going to address that selenium issue that's going on at the moment and see if maybe that helps with her hay fever. So there were a couple of other little things that were out as well. But I think what might be helpful for our viewers is if I just share screen so that you can maybe just tell them a little bit about some of the things that we can see on the Oligoscan. So this is a client of mine that I scanned a little while ago. The scans on here are 3 months apart. The gray one is her scan 3 months ago, and the colored one is her most recent scan. So maybe you can just talk about some of the things that you can see on the Oligoscan and what's the type of information. I will just scroll up and down so people can get a bit of an idea.
Yeah, we'll stay with the zinc and copper because that's the huge problem with this patient is the zinc and copper. So when you have the high zinc and the high copper, as you can see in the grey bars, that's called a zinc blockade. It means the copper is dominating the zinc and preventing its absorption. So what looks like super high zinc is the opposite. It's the failure of the zinc to penetrate into tissue. So it's essentially copper toxicity. And you're improving it. You can see how the copper and the zinc are going towards the left, towards the OK line, which is how they should be going when the patient is improving. So whatever you're doing is working, so keep doing it. And you can see also how when they first came in, looks like they were in insulin resistance or had hypoglycemia with that low chromium that you've got there. And that's much better now. And the low iodine is also a factor with endocrine disease, right? So that's great. Whatever you're doing is improving the nutrition. Yeah, and their mercury loads come right down. So that's really good progress in 3 months, Eugenie. Whatever you're giving them is showing really well.
I have to say that she actually lost 12 kilos in the 3 months, but she was also working with somebody who does like a biochemistry type diet where they do the blood testing and then they tell you what foods to eat according to your blood chemistry. So she was doing that in conjunction with homeopathic remedies and nutritional supplementation that I prescribed according to the Oligoscan. So she was having massive problems losing weight. And she did also have breast implants, which she removed. So I think that also played a huge role.
Well, if they were leaking, then yeah, you're having a toxic exposure from the breast implants. But I think most of the toxins are stored in fat. So when you get an overweight person burning fat quickly, you're going to see the values change as fast as you have done with this patient. And methylation is an issue. You look at the low B9. So you have to think maybe the MTHFR, or maybe there's something blocking the methylation of toxins. But I think seeing the changes you've made already, it's pretty phenomenal.
Well, this is what I mean with the Oligoscan. I feel like I was flying blind before. I didn't, clients come in and they have thyroid issues and you don't really know where the thyroid issues are coming from. And as homeopaths, we spend so much time talking about the mental, emotional, what was your childhood like? What was it like how did you feel when that guy broke up with you? Trying to look for the mental, emotional reason behind their physical symptoms, which is also really important. But I feel like with the Oligoscan, it's taken that guesswork out. I feel like I can have a quick little peek inside of their body, see what's going on, and then actually really target what it is that's causing the dysfunction in their body, along with obviously always treating the mental, emotionals like we always would. But I'm just so passionate about the Oligoscan and the difference that it's made. And maybe seeing as we're talking about endocrine dysfunction, like how would you pick up something like that on an Oligoscan, or is that something that you can do?
Okay, so if it's to do with blood sugar, you're going to see high antimony and low chromium. So we saw the low chromium in this one. I don't know. I didn't remember seeing high antimony, so that's not so bad.
Her antimony.
So antimony and chromium are antagonists. So when you're absorbing a lot of xenoestrogens and accumulating a lot of antimony from those, that's going to block your chromium uptake. It's going to push you towards diabetes, right? So we're talking major endocrine dysfunction, type 2 diabetes, unless you address it. So you've certainly stopped that happening with this patient, which is fantastic. The other thing is to think about the zinc and copper imbalances, which we saw before, because when you have zinc and copper imbalances like that with high copper, you get liver congestion. So the poor old liver, it's already struggling to digest whatever chemicals we're accumulating through life. But also, that's where a lot of those xenoestrogens are going to sit in the liver. And if it's a female patient and she has taken contraceptives, whether orally or internally, those things are always going to deposit their artificial hormones into the liver, and that's going to congest the liver. And then you're going to see this high copper and high zinc, which is always a sign of liver congestion.
I'm glad you bring up copper because there is so much conflicting information in the natural medicine world. And so many people will say that we are copper deficient and that you should take more copper.
Mm.
But why do you believe that? Talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, it's completely wrong. Yeah. Probably people who think that need to go back to the 1970s and read the works of Carl Pfeiffer, where copper toxicity first was placed on the map diagnostically. And that's all available online from the Pfeiffer Institute. And his works, of course, being continued by Dr. Walsh and other doctors since then. And copper toxicity is a huge problem. And I think in my 35 years of practice, I've only ever prescribed a copper supplement once in 35 years. I think that was because there was a cardiovascular risk factor with low copper. But in all the other cases, I've never given any copper supplements. And I've always seen that people have excessive copper. And because the human brain is in danger, I know we've been talking about endocrine system, but we were just talking yesterday about the dangers to the human brain. If we think about our children and all the ADHDs and OCDs and ODDs and all these alphabet descriptions being placed on our children, so that the level of cognitive impairment, the level of people on the spectrum increasing with each generation, the human brain is being destroyed. And so many of those children who have been given those diagnoses, I would say 80% of them have high copper. So it's a huge problem. So giving people copper and giving people who are going to bear children copper is going to push you towards having a child on that spectrum, because you'll have high copper before you have your children.
Absolutely. I've seen something interesting, especially in our family. So my son has never had fluoridated water. You know, maybe if he's like playing at a friend's house and they don't properly prepare their water and remove the fluoride, he's never had fluoridated toothpaste in his life. But his fluoride on the Oligoscan was really, really high. But my husband and his dad, so I had the privilege of scanning 3 generations. So my husband and his dad all had very high fluoride, which they've never removed fluoride from their water over the years. So I could only put that down to like generational,
absolutely,
being handed
transgenerational,
down.
which is not really a concept for homeopaths that's difficult. We already understand the concept of miasms, which is an inherited disease phenomenon. So why not an inherited toxic phenomenon? It's the same thinking. And that's exactly what happens. You can get a transgenerational toxic burden.
Well, I've definitely seen that. So that's why I believe it, because like I said, he's never had any vaccines in his life. He's never drunk fluoridated water or had fluoridated toothpaste. So it must have come from somewhere, which was very interesting. I just want to say here about copper as well, that you said that over 35 years, you've never had to supplement somebody for copper, maybe once. And this is the great thing about being taught something from a book or even a professional versus clinical experience. So clinically, we can see that we give somebody a remedy that you created called copper chelate, which is cupra metallicum in a 12C, 30C, 200C, and 1M. And we tend to prescribe that every second day or so. I've prescribed it for quite long periods of time. And then we really up their zinc, so 90 or 120 milligrams or whatever a day in a case like this one that we've got on the screen here. Then we retest them in 4 months or 6 months, and then we see the copper has come down and the zinc has come into a proper level. The client feels great. Their immune system is better. Their stomach acid is better because you need zinc to be able to create your stomach acid. So it clinically, we can see they don't have a copper deficiency. So that's the difference between clinical experience and the evidence from the scan versus just listening to somebody on YouTube or on wherever else, social media.
There's lots of theories out there, let's face it. And some of those theories have merit, but in terms of what we see in practice in clinic, you can't let the theories override what you see in front of your nose with your patient. That's the most important thing. So we have to be, as much as we can be, without prejudice when we're looking at our patients.
100%. And one of the things I do love about the Oligoscan is that you can do it from age 2 or 10 kilograms or 70 centimeters. So I have been trying to scan as many children as I can. And because I have quite a lot of children in the clinic with ADHD and autism and things like that, it is really interesting to see. You do see that excess copper and the zinc blockade. It does come up on these scans. And when you do reduce that, the symptoms improve. So it just once again tells us that clinically that does work.
That's right.
Yeah, amazing. And actually, while we're talking about these sorts of autism and ADHD, I know I'm jumping a little bit, but you have some really interesting thoughts on vitamin D, when it comes to children with autism. Do you maybe just want to talk to us about that? Because I feel we've got this amazing captive audience of tens of thousands of people around the world. So it's something that people should know about.
Okay, so if I can I will answer your question, but I'll just segue slightly if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
My wife is called Naima Hermiston, and she's also a homeopath, also been in practice as many years as me. So she's in the middle of writing her book called, Having a Child in the Age of Autism. So it's a book for parents, because when you have a child today, you have the thought in your mind, what if my child's autistic? What am I going to do, right? Nobody wants an autistic child, right? Yes, we want to include autistic children in the education system, in society, but we don't want to choose to have an autistic child. So what are the things I can do to avoid having an autistic child? And that's what her book's about. All the things you can do to avoid having a child with autism. And it's all research-based. So one of the things that we're talking about is making sure the vitamin D is optimal. So optimal levels means the level determined to prevent osteoporosis in aged people. And that's 50 in Australia. So we think it should be at least double that. We think it should be 100 in Australia. I can't remember what the measurement is in Australia. But you can also use vitamin D therapeutically in children who are far up the spectrum in autism, the non-verbal kids. So high doses of vitamin D are therapeutic in improving brain function. When I say high doses, I'm talking about a young child, 5,000 IU per day. All right. So you can use it clinically as a therapy as well. But even better than that, make sure that the parents are not vitamin D deficient when they conceive their children. And you mentioned fluoride before with your son. Fluoride blocks the uptake of vitamin D. That's the problem. So even though your blood test might say, oh, yes, you've got enough vitamin D, when you run the Oligoscan, you can see how fluoride blocks the intracellular uptake of the vitamin D. So high fluoride is one of the things that is going to produce children on the spectrum for two reasons. One, it blocks vitamin D, and two, it blocks iodine. And iodine is essential for brain development.
Absolutely. I actually really like scanning pregnant women as well. And I know you mentioned to me a while ago, we just use the pre-pregnancy weight, but it's something that I've started becoming quite passionate about, is getting my pregnant clients to come in at least a couple of times so we can scan them and just see where things are at. Because imagine something, it's not even painful. The test takes 5 seconds. You get the results in under a minute. You can know.
Guesswork.
And no guesswork. And you can see if that person's iodine is low, and you want to make sure that they've got great iodine to help with baby's brain development. You can see what their calcium and magnesium levels are like, and their methylation, their metals, everything else. So it's really wonderful to use even in pregnancy as well.
I think it would really carry homeopathic practice forward internationally for everybody by taking away a lot of the guesswork about what else is needed apart from the remedy, and identifying obstacles to cure. Very important. It's all on the first page of the organon. Know what you're treating, firstly, and know what the obstacle to cure is in the patient in front of you. So important to have that information. I'm sure if Samuel Hahnemann had the Oligoscan, he would have talked about it in the organon.
100%, 100%. Absolutely. He would have loved a tool like this. I have to say, as somebody, I did a little bit of naturopathic training when I started, but I'm not a naturopath. And so I'm just saying, for the other naturopaths, the other homeopaths out there who don't have naturopathic training, sometimes it can be a little bit scary, because suddenly you're finding yourself prescribing some supplements. So it can be a little bit tricky learning what is safe to prescribe and how much can you give and this sort of thing. But the bit of time that you end up investing and learning a little bit about that is really worth it. And also Jon has made it really easy, because in his book, he has got scans in here, and then he tells you about the case, and he tells you what he's prescribed. So he'll say chromium 600 micrograms a day, and he also gave the cadmium chelate remedy, and then what the client's response was. So I have relied on this book quite heavily to help me with knowing how much I can prescribe of this and that. And
no secrets in the book.
No, it's all there. So you're not like hiding, which some homeopaths are a little bit secretive about what was prescribed, but you don't hide what it was that you prescribed. Everything is right in there. So it's holding your hand throughout the process, which I really like.
Well, I'm at the age where I don't want more patients, because I've already got enough. So the more I can share what I've learned, the easier it is for me, because I don't have to explain everything to everybody. They can just read what I've written down. And then I feel like at least what I've learned I can share.
Absolutely. So for those people listening, because we're talking specifically about pain in the summit, which I feel the Oligoscan really ties in with that, because a client can come to you with any type of pain of any sort and you scan them and you can see where the disharmony is laying. But is there anything in particular that you can see if there's perhaps some underlying inflammation happening on the Oligoscan? Is there a particular marker that you would look for?
If your iron is elevated in Oligoscan, that's always a sign of inflammation. And if your boron, so iron and boron, and then if germanium and lithium are also, then that's a marker of either and or inflammation and or infection. And often you have both together, because often inflammation comes with infection, which leads me to the post-COVID infections that are causing pain.
Let's
I'm
talk about
segueing
that.
into something else now. Okay, so there's more of this happening since COVID, I've realized. And in my earlier cases of dealing with these kinds of terrible pain patterns, we're now seeing a lot more of them. So I don't know if you saw my presentation I did a few years ago on CIRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome.
Oh, no, I didn't. But I saw you one at AHA and the conference you mentioned there about the poly antiviral that you use. I don't know if you're going to talk about that, but that was really helpful. No, talk to me about CIRS because that is huge.
Okay. So CIRS is like chronic fatigue syndrome with steroids on, right? It's not only severe fatigue, but it's severe pain as well, like pain you can't live with. So I've been seeing more of these patients since COVID. And basically, people who come to see me for pain do so because all the things they've tried haven't worked. So I get the really difficult people to try and sort out. But what I'm seeing since COVID is, I'm guessing it's being triggered by the COVID vaccines. I don't know for sure. Or maybe it's being triggered by the live COVID virus in whatever forms it took 4 years ago. We're seeing the people with really severe fibromyalgia, that's burning, sharp, throbbing pains through their body, preventing sleep. So they've got to take really strong painkillers. I'm seeing more cases where this is referable to the herpes zoster virus, so the shingles virus. If you think about the shingles, your patients with shingles, and listen to their descriptions of their pain, it's very similar to these severe pain patterns where there's neuropathic pain that's really strong. Neuropathic pain that hasn't arisen from any injury, but has arisen from infection, toxicity, whatever's happened to the patient over the years. So we're using more and more of the remedies we normally give for shingles for these patients with good effect. So we use the nosode, the herpes zoster nosode, in ascending potencies. And normally we give the remedy arsenicum album 200C, which is a more or less specific remedy for post-herpetic neuralgia, because it's got the burning and the restlessness and all that's in it. So this is what I'm seeing a lot of since COVID. And the remedies, that's what's going on. Those remedies are very effective.
That is very interesting. I don't know if I've told you this before, but I have never had a cold sore in my entire life. Nobody in my family, not my siblings, not my parents, nobody in my immediate family has ever had cold sores. Not my husband, kids, nothing. Then 3 years ago, somebody who had the COVID vaccine the day before they came to our place, they actually stayed the night. So they had the vaccine the day before and then stayed at our place. We didn't know it at the time, but found out the next day. That night, my son was vomiting the entire night, and I woke up that morning with a cold sore. Now, I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a bunch of pimples, but this whole area here, it was humongous.
Shedding.
Yes, but since then, and luckily because I've used homeopathic remedies, they've become less frequent and smaller to the point now where I actually had one last week, but it was one tiny little one, which, you could hardly even see it. Whereas previously it was this whole area. It was just this huge mess on my face. But it's interesting that you said about, the shingles. So you're saying you would use herpes zoster nosode and ascending potencies for people with CIRS or chronic inflammatory response syndrome?
If that's what I discover, either in their history or in their symptom presentation. And I think there must be some herpes cells used in the COVID vaccines. They're not really telling us what's in the vaccines, but I imagine that's what's in them, amongst other things.
Yeah, there's something about the energy of that disease in the vaccine. So whether it's not that, but something maybe about the energy of that vaccine that resonates somehow with the energy of the herpes, or this is all the type of stuff that homeopaths, because we think outside the box, we can identify, oh, this looks like this, and we can think outside the box and use remedies for that.
And your son is clearly very sensitive if he's got vomiting from
Yes.
being close to this person.
Yes, I thought that was, but he has got an incredibly strong vital force. So I thought that was amazing that he just vomited it all out and he was fine the next day. Whereas for
got rid of
me,
it quickly.
he did. Whereas with me, it's now created this underlying susceptibility where if I'm run down or I have too much sugar, it's coming out of my face. So it's interesting for me, for him who's never had antibiotics, never had Panadol, never had vaccines. He's got this incredibly strong immune system where if he gets sick, he often throws a crazy fever and then the next day he's fine. He just like burns it all off and
Great
keeps
healing
going.
response.
Incredible.
We should all be wearing T-shirts saying fever is good. So I think, because you heard my presentation in Brisbane, so the other thing with COVID virus and the COVID vaccines is sometimes they activate whatever's sitting there. So maybe for yourself, having these herpetic eruptions on your face, and it's related to sugar cravings. So maybe there's some pre-existing yeast imbalance or something there that's now been activated or potentiated since you've been exposed to that shedding.
Maybe. I've been sitting with it because I've always been pretty healthy. And the last vaccines I had was when I was maybe like 10 years old or whatever. And I haven't had glandular fever or a lot of these other things that, or any like STDs or any.
Yeah.
So I am really baffled about why this has come up. I consider myself pretty healthy and there's nothing chronic. I've always had really good energy. So I've been sitting with what is it about this? Has it activated this in my system? I find it very interesting.
Well, you could either try taking the potentized version of whichever of the COVID vaccines that person had, or if that doesn't work, then you could take the mixed herpes nosode. So that's zoster mixed with simplex and mixed with herpes type 6, mixed all together. And that covers the wide spectrum of herpes.
Is that the one from Martin and Pleasance? Because I have been using that and that works amazing.
It probably is from Martin and Pleasance.
It works amazing. It's got a mix of a bunch of stuff and it does work incredible.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask with SIRS, there is that vcstest.com, visual contrast sensitivity test.com. Is that what you use?
That's the mold test. Yeah.
Yeah. And it will come up there whether you have SIRS, but is there a different way that you would test it or would you just go based on the symptoms?
I always take history. So I always spend a lot of time going through history. And we actually get people to fill in a 4-page form. So they write down all the history so I can go through it in detail. Then the symptoms, and then that narrows down where I want to inquire. And I inquire through doing muscle testing. So if I think there's a specific infection, then I just pull out the nosode and muscle test with that to see if it's active or not. So SIRS is not just herpes virus, it's also molds, as you just were alluding to then, and probably other co-infections as well. So for people living in Lyme areas, Lyme disease is a generator of SIRS, so Borrelia infections or the tick co-infections. So you've got molds, you've got herpes viruses, and you've got bacterial spirochetes are the 3 main vectors of SIRS.
And it can look like a variety of different things because the whole body is inflamed and then trying to find out what is the thing that's actually causing this inflammatory response can be fun. Which is why it is really good to have that really good intake form and then have diagnostic tools. I'm kind of like asking you these questions as if I don't know, but I do. So do you use any other forms of testing as well? So when you're working with your clients, apart from the Oligoscan, other forms of testing that you really like to use?
When we're seeing children on the spectrum, if they've got significant impairment, we order the Autu test, that's the organic acids, from the same lab I mentioned before. We generally order the complete microbiome, which shows you the yeast and fungal and bacterial overgrowths and the probiotic cultures. Sometimes we order the oral microbiome or the vaginal microbiome when people have infections in those parts of their bodies. Sometimes I order chemical panels like the one I did before to look for plastics, but these tests are all really, really expensive for Australian customers. So I really only order them judiciously if I really need them. But certainly whenever we get children who are fairly advanced up the autistic spectrum, we'll order the Autu test and the microbiome, as well as the Oligoscan.
Yeah, I have been ordering a couple of microbiome tests recently. They're about 415 Australian dollars through NutriPath for a couple of my clients with autism because I feel like I've done everything on my end of what I think could be going on here. But I just said to them, look, we just need to actually go and find out what does the microbiome look like. And like
Autu test, yeah. So the Autu test will show you what's no longer in the gut. So if there's still a yeast infection, but it's migrated from the gut into the bloodstream, it'll get picked up in the Autu test. Okay. Right? And it'll also show you the toxic exposure. So when the toxic markers are high, that's the time I say to the parents, okay, so what's been in your life in terms of chemicals? So case I'm treating at the moment, okay, there's got to be some chemicals. What would they be? So then quiz the parents where they worked or where they grew up. So the father had worked with using glyphosate. So I'm going to give potentizer glyphosate to the child, right? So I wouldn't know that without doing the oat test. And then the mold markers were still high. So I said, okay, you must have had mold in your house. He said, yeah, we were living in a house that was just riddled with mold when I was pregnant. So we give the mold detoxes. So again, the beauty of homeopathy is its specificity. So if you know what it is that needs to be treated, aphorism 3, right, it's powerful, right? If you're not floundering in the breeze, but you know exactly what needs to be detoxed or need to be treated, you're going to get really good change with those autistic kids because you know the things that are in their brains and you know how to remove them with the homeopathics.
Absolutely. I've started using the polyfungi detox. I used to use more like a mold detox, but the polyfungi detox, which friend Lloyd created, which has got various fungi and yeast in it as well. That's
Awesome.
been just a game changer in my clinic, and especially with these children with autism. But this is the thing, Jon, like parasites and yeasts and heavy metals, they all just have this like dance together. And apparently the yeasts can wrap around the heavy metals and the parasites can hide this and that. And sometimes it can be hard to know what you're treating, and which I always say, like, it's like kind of like a ball of string, like mixed string. And sometimes you pull this in and you pull this in and you're like, okay, which one should I pull to?
Well, when you have the copper and zinc imbalances that you showed before in that scan, that's where you always have to start because the liver is too congested. So you can't get any sort of clearing or detoxification without clearing the liver first. And if you try and give a constitutional remedy, often the patient goes into aggravation. So if you do, to use the French expression, the liver drainage, the organ drainage first, by treating the copper zinc imbalance in the liver, then that's going to make matters much easier. And you're right, a lot of the chronic infections hide under mercury. I think that's very true. So the high mercury patients who come in and say, well, I spent years detoxing all my mercury with my DMSA and my lipoic acid and all that stuff, I've still got the symptoms. It's because there's an infection hiding under the mercury. So I think you're right.
And something that you mentioned in your book as well is that people with this mercury toxicity, they are our clients that come in and tell us, I am sensitive to everything, even homeopathic remedies. And when you hear that, it kind of, it kind of like makes your ears perk up. Maybe we should just quickly mention something that with the Oligoscan is, it can be a little bit startling if you don't know what you're looking out for. And that is that sometimes if you're doing the job right, the metals will come up as looking worse on your second scan. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So the body sequesters toxins into tissue, right? This is homeostasis, right? The innate intelligence of the body to keep you well. So it'll take anything toxic out of the bloodstream immediately and sequester it into tissue where it can't do harm. It doesn't want it to go through the heart. It doesn't want it to go through the brain. So because it's sequestered into tissue, when you start a detoxification program of some kind, the body is going to say to itself, okay, at last, they're finally going to deal with this mercury burden that I've been hanging on to, locking away for all these years. Okay, I'm going to allow it to be released. So it's released back into circulation, released back into the microtissues, released back into the site where you're running your Oligoscan. So it's going to go up. In your following scan, it's going to go up. But at the same time it's going to go up, the patient says, I'm actually feeling better. So it's the movement, to use Herring's law as the idea, the movement from inside to outside is what's happening. And that's what you're seeing in Oligoscan. The heavy metals go up is the sign of Herring's law is working.
Yeah, and it's so much fun getting, like I said, when Matthias said, who do you want to interview? Like any excuse to have a chat with Jon again. So something that I think might also be worth mentioning, and this is what I mean, I feel like I'm doing things in reverse because I'm just so excited to get to chat with you again. But as I'm just talking, I'm just thinking there's people that have never heard about this before. So I feel like I should probably mention this, and maybe I should have mentioned it at the start, but just the difference between blood tests and hair mineral analysis and Oligoscan.
So blood is, if you think about when you're on a flight and then you get off the plane and you're in the transit lounge, right? So think of your venous blood, where most medical tests are done, as the transit lounge. It's just where things are not really doing much. They're just being moved around, but they haven't arrived at the destination yet. So then what's the circulation of the transit lounge? What arrives into the intracellular space is the destination. And that's where the Oligoscan is making its assay into the intracellular tissue. Then what your body tries to get rid of, it uses excretory tissue. So your hair is the marker of what you're able to excrete. So if you've got sequestered heavy metals, in the way I talked about before, it's not going to show in your hair because the body's got them locked away. It's only when you start detoxification, after 3 months, it'll start appearing in your hair, when your hair grows out. So as long as you understand what is the body tissue you're looking at, when you compare your blood tests and your hair analysis and your Oligoscan, as long as you understand the location of the tissue you're looking at, it makes good clinical sense.
Exactly right. I had a client the other day whose mercury was off the chart. It was not even on the chart, it was off the chart. And she was very upset with me. She took it quite personally. And then she went to her doctor and had a blood test done. And she triumphantly came back to me and go, my blood test is clear of mercury. I don't have any mercury on me. I was like, yeah, if you had mercury going around in your blood, you would be dead right now. Your very
That's right.
smart body is putting it into your vital organs, hiding it away. So it is important to know what it is that you're looking at. And it's really important to know with hair tissue mineral analysis that, you know, it takes the information that you receive is already a couple of months old by the time you get it because your hair needs to grow out, and then you cut it. Then you send it to the lab, and that can take 2 or 3 weeks, best case scenario, to get the results back. So by the time you get the results, it's like 3 or 4 months old. Whereas with a Oligoscan, it's telling you like right now where the information's there. I guess the downside with a Oligoscan is you do need to physically go to a practitioner to have it done. You can't do it via distance. So I do have some clients who live remotely here in Western Australia that we do use hair tissue mineral analysis. I don't like using it at all. One of them is going on holiday soon somewhere where there's a practitioner close by. So that is good. She's going to go get a Oligoscan done. I'm excited about that. Yeah. So I guess that's one little downside.
I bet you they're working on it as we speak, how to do it through mobile phones or whatever. I bet it'll come one day.
It will. And actually, I just recently learned that the technology of the photospectrometry is actually the guy that discovered it like from the 1930s, and he won a Nobel Peace Prize or something like that.
It's as old as the hills. There's nothing new about it. What's new about it is the studies and the reference ranges that have been developed, right? Because any test is worthless unless you have a reliable reference range, right? Is your result there or there? What does that mean? You know what I mean? So that's the genius of Oligoscan. It's using old technology in a new way with reference ranges that have been thoroughly researched over many years of clinical trials.
Yeah, I did hear on another podcast they were saying that it took about 10 years for them to actually perfect the reference ranges, which is really great, especially when we can clinically verify it and retest the clients, say they feel better. You can see on the Oligoscan they're better, and it does make a big difference. Jon, I'm just wondering, is there anything else before we go into where people can buy your books and all sorts of other things? Is there anything else that you think that we should talk about?
I suppose maybe people can think about, I would imagine, just going back to talking about the pain patterns that I'm seeing since COVID, I would imagine many of the practitioners listening to this will be thinking, yep, I've definitely seen more shingles in the last few years since COVID. So I think this is something to be aware of. And people who have these pain patterns without eruption necessarily, without the shingles eruptions, it might be suppressed shingles virus that they're treating. So to think of those remedies I mentioned before, the nosodes and the arsenic amalgam, to treat those pain patterns. And I'd like to think people will have some results they could share.
Amazing. So, Jon, can you tell the viewers where they can purchase your book from? And anything else that you would like to tell them about how they can get hold of you or learn more about your work?
Okay, so I think I have a slide. Should I share a slide?
Do that. That is brilliant. Let me just make sure that I can share.
Okay, so we have our clinic website, which is karunahealthcare.com.au, which you can see there. And scrolling down, there's our book publishing website, which is karunapublishing.com.au. And that's where you can buy all of the books. But the one we've been talking about today is the last one in the list, Mastering Chronic Disease. Excuse the ostentatious title. And that's available from our website. We supply books internationally, so it doesn't matter what country you're in, we can send books to you. But I suppose if you're in Europe, it's just as easy to buy the book from MS Publishers in Netherlands.
Brilliant. Amazing. Thank you so much, Jon. We really appreciate your time. And it'll be great if we have more people using Oligoscan all around the world. Is it worldwide?
Yeah, it's in every country. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I have practitioners who have clinics overseas. And so they just get someone to scan the patients overseas and send them their scans, and they just do it from Australia. So it's certainly making international practice easier in some ways.
And so, because there's going to be quite a lot of listeners from all around the world, if, say, somebody in Germany is interested in finding an Oligoscan practitioner, what would be the best way for them to go about that?
In Europe, it's called something different now. It's called SoCheck. So it's SO/check, CHECK. So I would imagine typing that into your Google search, and you'll find the local distributor in Germany or in France, or whichever country you're in, and they can point you to someone in your local area.
In America, have you got any ideas of there?
In America, it's called springdalehealth.com, and they are the ones who distribute it in America.
Amazing. And then for everyone listening, once you have your Oligoscan, make sure you get the Mastering Chronic Disease book, because it's just such a beautiful way of learning how to use your device correctly. You do also get an online manual as well. And actually, Jon, you probably know this, but I have the ebook of your chronic diseases book, and I have the physical copy because I love reading through the physical copy. But the ebook, I will just open up on my desktop and I'll just go Control F and then type in selenium, and then your chapter on selenium, or I'll type in fibromyalgia. And because it's an ebook, it's much easier to find it that way. So I do have the ebook and the physical copy, and it is dog-eared, even though I've only had it about a year. So
I like to go through my pages and write my own little notes in and fold the corners over. I'm a bit old-fashioned like that too.
I love that. I love it. Thank you so much, Jon. It's so lovely to speak to you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me today.